Welcome, Barbara Ascher. It's wonderful to see you, and welcome to the Seekers Forum.
It's so good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I just have to start by saying how much I loved your book. I mean, Ghosting, I think, is one of the best memoirs I've read about love, loss, grief, and resurrection, because there's a resurrection that happens in the book as well. So I'd like to just start by talking about the myths of love. I was so struck in the book by how it's both romantic and sober, that it's certainly a love story in the truest sense, and it's also a story about letting go of a lot of the myths of what love is meant to be and what relationship is meant to be. What did you learn about the myths of love through this experience? And what do you think others should pay attention to before they go through an experience like that?
It's when you go through something like this, love becomes something fierce. It doesn't have to do with you. It's just something coming out of you. And the goal is to take care of this person you love. And I think there's so many myths of love. Sentimentality really, really clouds the picture. We live in this Hallmark card world of love. It's none of that. It's none of that. Yes, falling in love is a wonderful experience. Who doesn't like falling in love? But that's a very, very, very different thing than when you get to see your love as a tidal wave. Just this huge force that comes in and isn't concerned about what anybody else is going to think. It's not concerned with any of the things that we think are connected to love. Love, one of the myths is the idea of selfless love. And people take that. You and Emerson say what that is, in fact, but people take that as a burden to carry. And then they notice that they're jealous, or they notice that their feelings are hurt, or their expectations were A, and instead what they got was B. I'm not saying that kind of love is superficial. It's deeply, deeply felt. Mm-hmm. But I learned that it's also very much something else that I had not experienced before. I adored my husband. I absolutely adored him. And then it became something else.
Let's talk more about that something else. You're talking about love as a kind of a tidal wave, a force that's bigger than what you anticipated. Can you give me an example of when you felt that in this experience moving through with Bob?
The minute that we got the diagnosis and we're sitting in the oncologist's office, I thought, okay, he has been pouring his love out to me all these years, this generous, generous pouring. And now I'm going to change the course. I'm going to put up a dam and send back all that love. I'm going to reverse this mighty river and just send back to him everything that he had sent to me. And now that you're asking me these questions, I realize that after that, I never thought, oh, does he love me? Or, oh, he's crabby today and I'm taking it personally. It was just so far beyond that. When you know that you're going to lose the person you love,
Mm.
your love becomes something other than what it was before.
Mm.
And it was pretty great before. We adored each other. It was a rare love. It was a big love, an improbable love. And then it became something going by the same name, but a different force. You talk about love being like gravity in your book. And it's more like gravity. You're just sending it out. You're just sending it out and sending it out and sending it out. And it just flows. You're not saying to yourself, I must love well because I'm going to lose him. I must love well today because he's in great pain. None of that. None of that. It just is. As gravity just is.
It sounds to me like you're saying that love becomes transcendental, that it becomes transpersonal. So do you lose self-consciousness? Is that part of what happens?
Thank you. That is so true. And I hadn't thought about it that way, but completely lose self-consciousness. Yeah. Because you're not, self-consciousness has to do when we're so focused on ourselves.
Right.
And we're worried. Will that person like me? Did I say the wrong thing? It's very self-absorbed.
Yeah.
And this is completely unself-conscious because it's not the self as you've known the self.
Can you say more about that?
Well, I can give you one example from the book. I'd always been thoughtful about being polite and not hurting anybody's feelings. And one day I guess it was the end of the shift, and I was in Bob's room, and an attending and residents were standing outside his room laughing and telling jokes. And I stormed out and I said, there is a man in here who is dying. You will go somewhere else to tell your jokes and respect what is going on in here. And it was so out, looking back, I realized completely out of character, but it was part of this fierce protection. And later I learned that I'd really hurt their feelings. I said to this person who was an attending, who was Bob's doctor, I said, tough.
And that's not something you would have done before.
Never.
Right. So it sounds like it's a liberating experience.
Liberating, except you're unaware of it being liberating because you're not self-conscious. You're not looking at yourself.
Right.
So as you ask me this, I think, yes, looking back, yes, it was. It was. And it's interesting because something strange happens because of that force that love had become. People just entered into it. There was this sense of, I kept thinking, this person is an angel. How did they show up? What's happening here is a miracle. How did that happen? And I think what it is that there's a gravitational pull, or you have entered into an alternative way of being. and you're sending out something that is alternative.
Mm.
And we aren't used to what that attracts.
Mm.
It's too bad we can't do it every day.
Well, I want to ask you a bit about how this has changed how you live now. You talked about saying yes to everything. That was one of your mantras after losing Bob. Has that continued for you as a way of life?
I hope so. I hope so. Glad you asked me that. I'll keep an eye on it. But yes, I think so. I think so. But it was very determined in a way that now I don't have to be, because I knew the moment he died, I knew that my instinct would be to take to my bed and just not get out. So I knew that I had to take a vow to say yes to everything, 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 everything. Now it's not all that important, but I like to think that, yes, I embrace opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so.
How has it changed you in other ways, this experience of being stripped down, which you were, and you write about it very transparently and very intensely? How has it changed who you are now and how you live?
It's very hard, I think, to answer that question. I think people on the outside notice change. It's very hard to notice it in oneself. Such a good question, Mark. I would like to think that I'm much more open. I would like to think that I'm much more open to the possibility of what the universe serves up. And the universe serves up some pretty mind-boggling stuff. Mm. I'd like to think that. I would also, I think, as you know, Buddhist practice is what you're hoping for and praying for in a Buddhist kind of way, is a sense of loving kindness towards all people, not just people you love, all people. Compassion for all people. Well, that for most of us, that's out of reach. It's a wonderful goal, and we should all be hoping that we get to the point in our lives where we can experience it. I think I'm braver in my writing. I feel that having been stripped bare, having been flayed alive, I have nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to go for broke.
Mm-hmm. That was my next question. Do you feel like you have less fear now about what if, or pulling back, or being risk averse? How has it affected your fear level about how you live and how you love also the people in your life?
Well, it's a good question, because I hadn't thought about it. These change is so unself-conscious when it has happened, when it's happening. But I don't think I'm afraid of anything.
Is that something that you could have imagined yourself saying 15 years ago?
No. I wasn't a fearful person. I was always very adventuresome, and I certainly wasn't risk averse. But I wouldn't say that I have no fear. I don't. I have no fear.
That's amazing. Did you notice after Bob died that there were parts of yourself you had not developed because he took care of them, or he could compensate or balance out, that you needed to then kind of complete your own education on how to live?
absolutely. Well, the practical things. He was very, very kind in that he protected me so that I could write. No, you go write. That's what you're meant to do. And so there were a lot of practical things I had to learn how to do. Just taking care of things like selling an apartment, right? Moving. So many things I had to do alone that I once would have been doing in partnership. So, yes, I had to learn how to do those things, and I had to not resent it. And I never did, and I don't know that that was something I consciously told myself, but I never thought, this is really not something I want to be doing. This is no fair. This is no fair. When somebody you love dies, well, you get off the playground of that kind of thinking, the no fair kind of thinking. Death is a very, very death. I keep using the word fierce, but death is fierce. Death opens you up. The one who's surviving, who knows what happens to the one who's died, but the one who has survived, you feel an extraordinary energy. That person, whatever the mind is, or if you prefer the soul is, that is so present. And I felt it as a vibration. I don't think I ever would have said in the past, oh, I must be imagining this. But I might not have noticed. After Bob died, I absolutely noticed. And I think because you are stripped bare, you have no skin, you have no protection, you have no defenses. That all leaves. And when that happens, very interesting things come in that had not been there before.
Right. I'd like to talk a little bit about anger. Human beings have anger. People who are losing spouses have anger. How did you cope with your own self-care, your own contradictory feelings in the presence of this fierce love that was coming up in you? Surely you didn't become selfless. You didn't suddenly become a saint. Did you pay close attention to your own needs during that time and feel like you deserved to have them?
I did pay attention to my needs, and I kept looking for the anger, and because I didn't want to be dishonest about that. I kept thinking about the stages of grief. Well, that's another subject. But that anger is part of it. And for some reason, that's not what I was experiencing. I was experiencing, besides the terrible pain, I was experiencing wonder and amazement.
Yeah. So how has this changed your other relationships? I mean, has learning to be transpersonal about love in that way, has it changed how you love your daughter, how you love your grandkids, how you love your current partner?
Yes. But again, not self-consciously. It's not because I've aimed for that. But absolutely. It becomes more selfless. And I think now about how my daughter as a teenager could really hurt my feelings. But now, none of that. I feel I'm so lucky to have people to love. The minute Bob died, I asked myself, what am I going to do with all this love?
Mm.
And I slowly discovered all the different ways there are to love. And I loved a much larger group of people, but I absolutely love Rebecca in, I think, bigger, or we keep using the word selfless, but that's the gift of grief, of horrible loss, is a certain selflessness, because you've lost everything.
Right.
So you're not going to lose your status. You're not going to lose your place in people's affection, or you might, but what do you care? That's not foremost on your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, my current partner, it's been really fascinating because he too has a sort of illness, which was not present for the first years of our marriage, was certainly not present when I fell madly in love with him. And interestingly, the love hasn't changed. He's a very different person now than the person I married. And I've been so interested to see that the love doesn't change. He has changed.
Mm.
My love for him has not changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's different. But again, it's not like my daily practice where I sit down and hope that my heart get larger. This, you know what, for lack of a better word, this is grace. It's unasked for and just given without any questions. It's just there. And in the book, I write about this weird moment of grace, when Bob was really sick, super, super sick, and in a great deal of pain. I was squeezing the morning orange juice, and I pressed down on an orange, and suddenly I was filled with this light and this sense of bubbling joy. And I thought, this is weird. And then I thought, I'm like a percolator, all these bubbles coming up. And it still gives me goosebumps to remember all these years later. So I wondered whether I should tell Bob, because he was dying and I was having this experience of pure joy. And I'd been exhausted up until that point. I walked in, sat down at the table, gave him his orange juice, and I said, the strangest thing has just happened. And I described it to him. And he said, yes, this has been a time of great pain and great joy.
So he was feeling it too.
Absolutely feeling it too.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I want to talk a little bit about love and endurance. You know, this is an important topic. As Thomas Merton said, prayer and love are learned in the hour when prayer becomes impossible and the heart has turned to stone. And I've always loved that quote because it speaks to what happens in relationship when you reach a point where you feel like you can't take another step forward. And you do anyway. And that power that moves you forward when you feel like you can't move forward. Did you notice that your endurance increased and that you had to, when you moved through those moments of impossibility, how love made the impossible possible for you?
Yes. Yes, I would never have been able to imagine what was made possible during that time. I wouldn't have been able to imagine behaving the way I did, accomplishing what I did, because it wasn't I didn't feel that it was I felt that I was being moved around on a stage by a great director. Come in now, this way, come in. So I could endure because I had help. I felt that I had help, that I was being helped.
Mm.
I was just reading about our town for something I'm writing. And thinking about the stage manager as God.
Mm.
And I don't like to use that. I don't like to use the term God because it's so limiting. We bring our human ideas of God to that. All I can say is that I very much felt as though I was being moved in directions that I had to go.
Mm. Mm. Are you a person of faith?
As a child, I was exceedingly devout. Nobody in my family was, but I loved church. I loved the Book of Common Prayer. I would go off to church by myself as a very young child. And one day I grew up in the country, and if you're growing up in nature, it's pretty easy to be a person of faith because, wow, how did this come to pass? So when I was about 12, I was lying down in a meadow, and suddenly what came into my mind was, I'm in a God sandwich. I was looking up at the sky and the clouds the way kids will, and I was feeling the earth underneath me. And then I struggled, as we all do, with faith. I certainly struggled with ritual. I struggled with certain rites. And then I realized I don't have to struggle. I just don't have to, I don't have to do it. I can believe whatever I want to believe. I can believe the world is sending me so much evidence of something other. I'm just going to believe that that is the case. And I do have faith for sure in the Buddhist practice. I have absolute faith in that. I know that no harm will come to me. I know that only good will occur as I continue to practice.
Mm-hmm. And you don't necessarily feel that way about the rituals of the church?
No. No.
Now, I want to talk about love after loss, Barbara, because you had the extreme good fortune of falling in love in a big way after going through this, losing the love of your life. In the last chapter, you say, in contentment, the heart no longer hungers. You had come to a point where you enjoyed your own company, you were okay on your own, you weren't looking for a relationship, and yet there it was. And of course, as you see, I love the way you write it, like just when you think it's over, that's when the universe is going to be there to tell you that it isn't. So how do you open your heart after great loss like that? What would you say gave you the courage to do that?
Well, you don't shut down. And to not shut down, unfortunately, you have to go through what's happening to you emotionally after in loss. Because if you shut down, and who could blame us? It's a horrible thing. Grief is a horrible, horrible thing. So I think it's very understandable to try to shut down. This hurts too much. It hurts too much. I think I was very fortunate in that, not in the pain, but in the ability to stay open. And I don't even know that I was intending to do that, but I knew I had to do it. I knew I had to be open. And if love is like gravity in that space, in that opening, nature abhors a vacuum. Things are going to come pouring in, and a lot of things came pouring in, and it was a long time after Bob had died. I was, in fact, completely content. And I realized I had had my big love. And because I was such an idiot, I said to myself, I've had my turn, as if there is such a thing. I've had my turn. So many people don't have one turn. I don't expect anything like that ever. And I am content with that. I'm satisfied with that. And I think maybe that's when it happens.
When you let go of hope.
Yes. And let go of expectations. Yeah. And it's not, the hope's not there because that doesn't matter anymore. Or you think it doesn't matter anymore. Certainly after Bob died, well, I write about it in the book, I would see somebody on the bus holding a book that was the kind of book Bob would read. And I would want to follow him and ask him if he'd like to marry me. When I was teaching in Chicago, and I followed a man who was in a tweed jacket with suede elbow patches, carrying a book just the way Bob carried his books. And I was going up the stairs to go back to class. He was coming down the stairs. I turned and I followed him. And I said to myself, now, okay, you catch up with him. What are you going to do? Ask him to marry me. What else? Anyway, all that went away.
There are moments of magical thinking in the book, the moments that reminded me of Joan Didion's book of, just somehow the man who was reading the same book is going to be my husband, that kind of thing. Were you aware that it was magical thinking while it was happening, or were you actually convinced of what your mind was doing?
I wasn't convinced, but there was nothing stopping me. And I didn't think there was anything magical about it. I just thought it was a possibility.
It's within the realm of possibilities. So without getting too personal, Barbara, when you got into a new relationship after all those years, did demons come up for you? Did you have PTSD that came up for you around when your heart started to open? Did fear then return? How much of a struggle was it for you to let it happen?
The big love, the second big love, or the
second big love?
A little love. So a little love.
No, the biggie. Your husband, your current husband.
It's an important question, so I want to give it some thought.
Take your time.
No. I think I'd gotten through my post-traumatic stress. And also, I realized there is no post-traumatic. There is no post. We'd like when huge events, huge emotions, we'd like to control them by putting them in little boxes and labeling them. And you can fall for the idea that it's post-traumatic. It's not post-traumatic. If you think of veterans, their nightmares about being on the battlefield, that's not post. That's trauma continuing to act out. So no, I didn't have any of that. I had a kind of certainty that, yes, this is it. This is it. And so did he.
Have you always been someone with strong intuition?
Yes.
So beyond the mind, beyond reasoning it out and logic and rationalization, you trust your heart, you trust your gut.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, in your book, you talk about this. Emerson talks about this. And it actually was a big support to me, because I thought, oh, okay, I can trust them. These important thinkers, Mark Matousek and Ralph Waldo Emerson, say, trust your intuition. And yes, and there's a certain energy that you pick up if you are an intuitive person. You can walk into a room and pick up either negative energy or positive energy. It's as if you have one less layer of skin, picking things up. Bob used to say to me, I wish you could grow an extra layer of skin. Can't you do that? No, impossible. But that's where, if you're going to talk about magic, that's where the magic is. Intuition is a magical, wonderful, wonderful thing. And I don't think it steers us wrong. I don't know. What do you think?
It never has me, but I need to be very clear on what voice I'm listening to.
Yes.
What I can call intuition sometimes can be desire, can be a whim, it can be impulse, or it can be just attraction or something like that. So I think we really have to get quiet.
Yes.
So that we can hear which voice is that, where is it coming from, and does it ring true? Or is there a sense that it doesn't bear close scrutiny? It's important to know, I think, the source of it, whatever the information is coming from. So I want go ahead, Barbara.
Impulse, that's a very important point, because I think I was pretty impulsive for a while, not crazy out of my mind, not doing anything reckless, but I think throwing myself into what I believed I should be doing, when in fact, not really. And intuition is different. Intuition, as you say, if you're listening to the voice and thinking about the voice, thinking about the source, you can pretty much sort it out and understand, is this intuition or is this desire?
Right. One of my favorite poets, Stanley Kunitz, who I know you and Bob used to read to one another as well, writes, as I'm sure you know, in The Testing Tree, that in a murderous time, the heart breaks and lives by breaking, which to me says volumes about what happens in this transformational experience of love. How does heartbreak evolve us as individuals?
It enlarges us. The heart breaks open. It's not that it crumbles up in pieces and falls to the ground. It breaks open. It expands. And which is interesting, because in pain, you would think, again, you would shut down. But in fact, your heart, if you're lucky and if you're watchful and thoughtful, it breaks open. And those lines from Stanley Kunitz are among my favorites in poetry, because it lives by breaking. And how cruel is that? For lack of a better word, how painful is that? What a painful awareness that we know that our heart is alive because what feeds it is heartbreaking. The heart is hurt. And he got that right. That is a great poem.
A great poem.
Great poem. The Testing Tree. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. And so love and pain go hand in hand in human life. It's not that love necessarily creates pain, but because of getting attached to people, depending on people, pain comes up. I always say that grief is the price of admission, to love. Do you see pain differently in your life now when it comes up? Do you have a different way of contextualizing your own pain now when things happen?
Yeah, I watch it. I look at it as though I'm out in the woods and I've seen a plant that intrigues me. I just watch and look and ask, oh, what's this? Let me think about this a bit. So that you're aware that you're experiencing pain, but it's not a gut punch, because you register pain and then you look at it. What is pain? Well, actually pain, except for physical pain, but emotional pain, it's just energy working its way through. It's just coming through this amazing river that we're in. This is just debris that passes by.
And does connect us to other people in pain as well.
Absolutely. I think our own pain is essential for empathy.
Yeah.
You can flip. How would I feel if this were happening to me? If you have experienced if you've experienced pain, you can understand in others. And again, empathy is not sentimental at all. It's a gift. It's a gift that you are capable of being in another person's shoes, which is another form of loving, if you will.
It becomes the pain. It's not just your pain. It's the universal experience of pain that you're partaking of.
Yes.
So you don't take it quite as personally.
No.
Right. I'd like to ask you just a couple more questions. Barbara, you've brought up sentimentality a couple of times during our conversation. What is it about sentimentality that is false to you? And how can we guard against sentimentality when we are loving, when we're in authentic, genuine heart connection relationships with people?
I think it puts up a wall. I think you're satisfied. Oh, this is really cool. Connecting with this person is, when in fact we aren't really connecting. We're connecting on a superficial level. It doesn't feel superficial. It doesn't feel that way. But and I think now, I don't want to be the 1 millionth person who has blamed something on social media, but I think our emotions get more and more superficial, and we're satisfied with them. That's the sad part. We're satisfied. We are sentimentally satisfied. We believe the emotion that just goes so far, and it keeps us. And of course, that's going to fail. There's no way. There's nothing honest and deep about sentimentality. So if we're satisfied with that, we're not going to go any deeper. And I think people confuse love and sentimentality. Now, sentimentality is wonderful in the sense of the old songs,
right.
So much that's delightful about it, but you just have to be aware that you have to be aware of what it is. Yes, this old song makes me feel so affectionate towards you.
Mm.
But that's fine. That's fine. And we all love it. We love that feeling. Why not? Why not? But we shouldn't be fooled into thinking, okay, we can stop right here.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Being moved by old songs is very different than believing that what Frank Sinatra is singing is a deep truth. You know,
Right.
polka dot and moonbeams. My parents loved that song. It made them very nostalgic for their past. And I think it made them feel more loving towards each other. But that's in the moment. Whereas love is not in the moment. You can experience in the moment, but it doesn't end with the moment. It keeps on going. Just keeps on.
That's beautifully said and really deeply true, that just because something hits your heartstrings and you move in that moment and your emotions go flare up for a moment doesn't mean that it has any endurance to it. It doesn't mean that it's real. You know, in the same way that I can hear the Star Spangled Banner and get choked up, even though I'm not a particularly patriotic person, there's something about Oscar Wilde has a great line about this, the power of, cheap songs, basically, to move us that way. But that's really important to say, that love isn't just in the moment. Love goes on, and it doesn't depend on being moved necessarily. It doesn't depend on feeling one emotion or another. It's this force we're talking about that's bigger than both of those.
At weddings, very frequently you hear somebody will read Corinthians, love endures all things. And love goes on, and love never ends. And I think if we really paid attention to that, we would know more about love than we do. Terrible, terrible grief taught me that. Realizing that something was going to come to an end taught me that. But I don't think, as it's said in all these weddings, you're getting married, and of course this love is going to endure. Of course, this love is never going to end. But the truth of that becomes much more real. Truth, that is key. Truth becomes, you have a much clearer sense of what is true. And you can put your faith in that. Just put your faith in it. You don't hold on to it. Just put your faith. You recognize what a special moment it is when you've had a moment of truth. Whether it's when you're reading, or something you're reading like Stanley Kunitz, or just being out in the world, something somebody says, something an emotion you experience.
And one last question. I think I know the answer to this, but I'd like to hear your response. Do you believe that love is a spiritual practice? Do you see love as do you see what you were experienced with your husband as a kind of a soul journey?
Oh, yes. Certainly one of the great teachers of this was Christ, who was able to love the unlovable. And if you believe that, then it's very much a spiritual experience. And again, we're talking about the opening of the heart. The more you love, the more your heart opens. And if you ask me what you have, that is a spiritual practice. I think the opening of the heart may be one of the most important spiritual practices.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Barbara. This was such a beautiful conversation.
Thank you for inspiring me, Mark. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, my dear. So I'll see you soon.